Well, Happy New Year's, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls at SMB Nation. Thank you so much for attending. I have been on a couple of calls today, Wednesday the 9th, where it kind of feels like we're all getting back to work in the private sector. Last week, quite frankly, it felt a little bit like a wash where people were still a little bit on vacation, answering some emails, but boy, howdy, now we've hit the ground running. And as I always like to tell Jenny over in the radio control room, next time you look up, it's going to be the 4th of July week. It's going to be the middle of the year. It's going to be that week, which behaves a lot like a holiday week, and just hang on fast. With that said, shout out to Jennifer Hallmark. I got a LinkedIn notification the other day with the start of the year. You know, LinkedIn has a timer. So Jenny has officially started her 12th year with SMB Nation, according to LinkedIn. So thank you for all that you do. Appreciate. Jenny, go ahead and take a bow. Say hello to the kind audience.
Hey guys.
All right. Well, thank you for all that you do. I can't bring you up on stage as much anymore because we don't do the fall conference, but this is a second place. This is second best. A little bit of housekeeping, folks, before we jump into it. I will be down in the Silicon Valley next week. I just put that trip together. I'm going to be there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in San Jose, down in the South Bay area. If you want to hit me offline, if you want to get together for a beer, a little bit of fun, that would be fine. And a little bit of business, a little bit of fun. Then it's off to Fort Lauderdale end of month for IT Expo and the blockchain conference at the Fort Lauderdale Conference Center the last 2 days of January, first day of February. So that'd be a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday into month. And I will be giving speeches on blockchain as well as leading a panel on new technology. So that's confirmed. With that said, let's jump into the good stuff. Oh, and always use your questions feature to type out your questions. We expect a lot of questions. We have a large audience today, and we're here to talk about how to make money with Microsoft Teams. Let's get going. So we have heaps of speakers helping us out today. So we have Dave Field from Microsoft, who's perhaps the best connector that I know in the industry. We have Doug Green from Telecom Reseller. We have the well-known Jameson West. Jameson, we're going to hit you a little bit more on the back end, but I want everybody to participate at every single step along the way. That's kind of how we roll, is to make it a round table. Peter Tsai from Spiceworks is going to join us at about 12:30 Pacific with to report on a study that he's accomplished. And then we have Sanchet from Microsoft, who in just a second I'm going to hand off to, because we're going to level set with what is Teams as we sit here in early 2019. We got to level set first, and then we can jump into the good stuff. So the agenda: what is Microsoft Teams? Then the Spiceworks research on Microsoft Teams versus Slack with a twist on some of the telephony components. Then we have a roundtable on the Teams, about making money with Teams. And that includes both the data collaboration side, and it includes the telephony unified communication side. Then we're going to bring Jameson West on at that point with the focus on partner evidence of using Teams. He also has some insights into Teams versus Slack himself, and then a couple of final thoughts on Teams versus Slack, and so on. So folks, as usual, the webinar is what you make it. And please ask your question. Jenny, I'm going to lean on you today to go ahead and ask the questions as they come in. With that said, what is Microsoft Teams? So Sanchet, if you're ready to take the presenter role, Jenny, if you could help facilitate that, we're going to take just a few minutes to level set with what is Microsoft Teams, and it's a legitimate conversation because it's always changing. So Sanchez, go ahead and grab that baton as it flies across the ecosphere.
Hey guys, this is Sanchit here. Happy New Year, everyone. And to begin with, here's what I'd be doing. I'd also ask my colleague Dave to share his screen, and we'd run you through a series of it's a flip book, I'd rather say, and followed by which I'd be sharing my screen, and we'd go ahead and see a demonstration of Teams, how easy it is to kind of have your users enabled for voice with Teams in a matter of minutes, how you can have a user within your organization get a new number based on the location of that user. And that's how simple it is to kind of set a
Yeah,
user, and you can enable your user for Teams, and the flexibility that your user gets in terms of from where they can kind of join in and use the Teams client, irrespective of whether it's a mobile device or it's a desktop, it's a laptop. We kind of make sure that you get a uniform experience with Teams. Dave, I'd like to hand it over to you to quickly run
sure.
us through the flip book, and then I'd follow up with a demo.
Great. Thanks, Sanchit. Yeah, we're going to kind of team present this thing. We're going to use teams today, which gets a little awkward when you're talking about a Teams team. Anyway, so what I want to share first off is we have a flip book, which is our partner marketing toolkit for Microsoft Teams. This is probably the most comprehensive resource I've come across to help you kind of get an idea of what is Microsoft Teams, what are the partner opportunities around Microsoft Teams, and then how to prepare yourself and your organization to deliver on these opportunities. We even include some partner marketing plans and a bunch of additional resources that you can leverage to kind of help ramp up. So, that said, when you get the link to this flip book, you'll see that there's a lot of embedded videos, there are PowerPoints in here, and a bunch of other live links, which I'm going to try to avoid because we're trying to actually present this. So as we go into this, kind of the first step is an introduction to Microsoft Teams. What we've really done here, if you've been an Office 365 consumer, especially for SMB Nation audience, as you have transitioned your business from small business server to other platforms that enable the same functionality, many of you have chosen Office 365 for the collaboration and the email and things like this. Teams takes all of that infrastructure from Office 365 and kind of overlays this with a killer app, if you will. An application that combines the collaboration tools, combines the messaging tools, the chat, the voice communications, and puts it all into one space. So that's essentially what it's become. So all of these experiences are available within the Teams client, within the Teams web app, within the Teams mobile apps, and kind of help bring your teams together.
Dave?
Yeah,
Dave, if you don't mind, my job is to interrupt along the way and try to have fun where we can find it. But the way you're describing that, it takes me back a few years. And I don't know if that's me that's doing the rebound, folks. If you're not speaking, tap mute. But Dave, you'll appreciate this analogy. But do you remember when the devices came out? And this is just a simple Comcast device. But do you remember when the all-in-one came out, where you could run everything from one of these, right? Your TV, your cable connection, your stereo, and it was dazzling. It was hard to configure. But it's almost analogous to the way you're describing Teams. I mean, is Teams kind of my all-in-one little tech buddy?
Mm-hmm. I would say yes. And, to be completely honest, we've had a number of runs at this in the past.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember Office Binders?
Nope.
We had a construct that would let you create an Office binder, and you could bring in all of your collaborative documents and everything into one space and have people work with those. And I used them exactly once because they were huge resource hogs. But anyway, what we
Yeah, please continue. I
yeah,
didn't mean to interrupt
no
you. Go ahead.
problem. But what we've experienced with this, as this has gone live, I rapidly moved from, oh gosh, not another one, to a total convert to this. Uh, it has really awakened my ability to collaborate across our business. Um, in the Teams application, and you might see some of this in Sanchit's demo, you can chat around a document. You can create documents in chat. You can share files in chat, and you can chat about files. So it really works the way you work and gives you the ability to collaborate kind of across all aspects of your business. We have some resources within the flipbook here. There is this day in the life resource, which I really like. There are day in the life resources for IT project managers, for construction supervisors, for other job roles that your customers might have. And it kind of tells you how they go through their day using Teams. So it kind of gives you a good look at what's possible.
And Dave, to connect the dots, by the way, I like the infographic, and feel free to put that link up in chat, or we will send it out with the thank you email for people to download it. But with the day in the life paradigm, that was a huge part of the early SBS era, SBS 4.5, 2000, 2003, where we use that storytelling paradigm. I mean, my compliments. It's nice to see it still around. It humanizes it.
Yeah, and it's a great conversation tool to use with your customers.
Yeah.
You can download these, print them out, hand them to your customers, and kind of walk them through the scenario. So around the partner opportunity, I understand a lot of partners, especially those attending the call today, are approaching this from the voice aspect. The voice telephony and these sorts of things. But what Teams has done is it's taken the voice component and married that to the collaboration component. So partners who were focused on collaboration in the past can now basically dip their toes into the voice waters. Out of the box, Teams does team-to-team voice, but you can easily add the PBX and other telephony capabilities to the tool so that it gets outbound dialing capabilities, inbound call receiving capabilities, voicemail, and the whole deal. And that'll be part of Sanchit's demo. But it basically wakes up, if you've been in one side of the world up till now, it opens the other one up to you and basically doubles your opportunity.
And we're going to double click down on that with Douglas Green a little bit later in the roundtable about voice and data. So folks, keep that thought. Please continue, Dave.
Definitely. And I'll just kind of put it out here at this stage of the presentation. Teams has already become our fastest selling product to date. Of any product Microsoft has ever released, Teams has done the deepest penetration and the most breadth of any application we've ever delivered, which is, I think part of it is due to the fact that it overlays a lot of existing infrastructure. It's a free part of Office 365 Pro Plus, and basically just kind of takes it from there and makes it work. So around getting ready for Teams, a couple things to kind of talk about is as you tool your business, if you're going to be delivering Teams, you use a lot of your existing capabilities. If you're doing Office 365 today as part of your SBS replacement or even as part of your ongoing business model, none of that changes. All of the work you do for Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, all of this builds the infrastructure upon which Teams operates. So that's just part of your motion. If you're doing voice today, you'll just need to learn how we do voice in Teams. And Sanchit's going to show you how to do voice in minutes with Microsoft Teams in just a little bit.
Okay.
And then in terms of just checking out the features, I encourage you to try it out. Spend some time with it, create a team, pull down some of the add-ins. There are several hundred Teams add-ins at this point, including add-ins from GoToMeeting and Slack and some of the others. So feel free to leverage some of those and plug them in and see what they do inside of Teams. And if you have any questions at all, I stand ready and Sanchit through our partner advisory services to answer any questions and kind of take you to the next level with your delivery.
Yeah, I have a question. So is Teams available in the SKU with Action Pack that SMB Nation partners know and love?
Yeah. Office Pro Plus is in the Action Pack. So if you're using Office Pro Plus today, Teams is on your toolbar.
Okay.
You maybe just haven't opened it up yet, but it's there. So yeah, definitely. And if you're in Office 365, if you're using the Action Pack Office 365 subscription, you should be able to install the Teams client and use it anytime.
Thank you.
We have a downloadable marketing plan. If you need some assistance going to market, we also have pre-sales advisory services through Microsoft to backstop any of your pre-sales opportunities and help you out with those. So just wanted to point that out. And finally, in terms of kind of taking it to the next step, we have a lot of resources in the flip book here to help you prepare, orient yourself around how to do Teams. And then some of the kind of transitional elements of, how do I migrate my people who are on Skype for Business over to Teams? So we've got journey guidance on how to take your customers step by step, through the phases of migrating from Skype for Business over to Teams. So I'll just kind of set it there. I will provide this flipbook resource in the chat as soon as I go dormant here for a second. And I'll also provide some other resources that Jenny will send in the follow-up email from today.
Thank you. Cool, Sanchit. Let's take a test drive.
All right, thanks, Dave, for this. And what I'll do is I'll quickly go ahead and share my screen in here. I don't see an option yet to share my screen.
Jenny, if you could kick that over. And folks, I see there's some questions queued. Hang tight. Let's get through the demo, and then I'll tackle the questions. Thank you very much. Okay, you're on, sir.
Okay. All right. So I've got a machine that I've remote in. It's a Azure virtual machine that's got Windows 10 client onto it. And I'm currently logged in onto the portal. What we'd look at today is how in a matter of minutes, you could have your user set up and you could enable that user for voice, right? With that being said, let's delve in deeper onto the demo. And I've logged in onto the Office 365 portal here as a global administrator. And here's my landing page. I hope you guys are able to view it.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so let me click on the admin tile, and that takes me to the page where I can manage my users. I've got that tab open. So let's look at the users that I've got in my organization. What I'd like to begin with is I'd want you to be able to differentiate between the various offerings. Let's say if we are looking at the basic SKU of only Office 365, and what exactly that gives us is, let's say if I am looking at maybe a business premium SKU or maybe an enterprise SKU, it comes along with Teams, and I can enable my user to use Teams. And I can use Teams for collaboration as well as for voice. But one needs to understand this difference that when I have a basic SKU of Office 365, it would only allow my users to initiate Teams to Teams call. What that means is if the other person within my organization is also logged in onto Teams, I'd be able to initiate that call. But understand this difference. What if I want to dial to someone who's connected to a telephony system
Right.
or maybe a mobile device? And that's when we need something called as a PBX, which is termed as phone systems within Office 365. And apart from phone systems, because just like we had legacy PBX as well, that allows us to call or dial by extension. And when I talk about the traditional world, the traditional telephony world, in our office buildings, we had a box, and that box had all the telephony lines coming in from our desk phones, and it would terminating at that box, and that box allowed us to call within the office building, and we did not have ability to dial out to someone who's connected to the PSTN world. And that's where we need a telco provider that
Yep.
kind of provides us the ability to dial someone who's connected to the PSTN world. And when I talk about PSTN, it's pretty much same as what an internet is, right? PSTN has all the different telco providers managing, or service providers as we call them. They manage, or they manage services, and they provide lines, be it ports, or be it, let's say, TDM lines, or it could be SIP trunks as well. And depending upon whether you're using, let's say, IP based software where you can integrate SIP trunks, I won't delve in deeper onto it, but let's quickly look at a user who's been enabled for voice within Teams.
And by the
And
way, if you don't mind me interrupting, just that term, public switch telephone network, public switch telephone network. Okay, please continue.
yep. Right. Okay, so let me look at one of the users named Skype user 1 within my organization. And if you see, this user's got a set of licenses. All you'd have to do is create up a user, which is pretty straightforward. If you were to start with Office 365 portal, we've just seen the landing page, and we have to click on admin tile, which opens up the admin center, and we can go under active users, click on add a user. That would allow us to create a user on Azure Active Directory. And once we've got a user created, in order to enable a user for voice, all we'd have to do is just go ahead and assign the right set of licenses. And when we talk about licenses, we got to be pretty careful in terms of what license do we want to assign a user. And with this Office 365 tenant of mine, I've got enterprise E5 subscription that I've subscribed, which comes along with, here's one thing that I want you to focus upon. It's got Microsoft Teams. Apart from Microsoft Teams, it's got something called as a phone systems. Yep, here we go. Here's the phone system as well. It's included in Office 365 E5. And as you all must be familiar with Office 365, the flexibility it offers in terms of what plan you can subscribe for. Let's say if you do not want the entire enterprise E5 suite, maybe the organization of your customer isn't really ready for using the rest of the workloads that comes along with enterprise E5. For instance, if I were to talk about advanced e-discovery or maybe customer logbox features, so if you do not want these features, then probably you should go with maybe enterprise E1 or a business premium. And on top of it, you can have a phone system added as an add-on subscription. With that being said, besides the phone system that is kind of similar to what we had, or what was termed as PBX back in those days, and besides this, we need a calling plan. And when we subscribe for a calling plan, Microsoft becomes your telco provider. Right. With that being said,
Now, a question right there. So with the calling plan, that's dial tone. And is Microsoft providing dial tone, or is Microsoft working with telecoms who provide the dial tone?
no. So we directly provide the dial tone, and
Okay.
we'd be the telco provider going forward.
Okay.
And you also have, that's actually a good question. I'd say with that, what you could do is you could, let's say if you've got a telco provider, maybe let's say it's AT&T, And if you'd want to port your existing set of numbers from AT&T to Microsoft, we'd see that in a jiffy how exactly you can submit your porting requests and how those numbers would eventually be ported over to Microsoft, and how easy it is. I mean, in a matter of minutes, you can assign that same number to a user of yours after porting. So porting typically requires, it's a procedure that one needs to follow, and it typically takes anywhere between a week to 2 weeks. And because it involves a lot of things, right? Meaning you got to be requesting your existing telco provider to kind of provide you an NOC to move away to a different telco provider, and that background procedure takes a while, and that's where it can take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks. With that being said, what I do next is, we've seen how we can go about creating up a user, what all licenses are required basically in order to enable a user for voice. I'm not doing anything apart from creating up a user and assigning a license. And now I'd be moving on, and I'd go to admin centers. I'll click on Teams and Skype, which would open up the Teams and Skype admin center for me. Here's what the landing page of Microsoft Teams and Skype for Business Admin Center looks like right now. And as most of you must be aware of the fact that we are undergoing a transition from Skype for Business client application to Teams. And we'd see what all benefits one has, because when we talk about Skype for Business, we are pretty much limited to chats and calling. But let's say at the same cost, if you could use or leverage a better collaboration tool and increase your productivity by many folds, then why not use it simply? We'd see how Teams provides collaboration, calling features, jumping onto the meetings, and while communicating, let's say how exactly could I go ahead and simply jump on to accessing any files that's saved in my SharePoint file or SharePoint site. So with that being said, under Microsoft Teams and Skype for Business Admin Center, what I do for now is, since I need to talk about enabling a user for voice, that can be done from the legacy portal. It's eventually going to be migrated over to this admin center itself, and you wouldn't have to go onto legacy portal. But for now, since there's a transition that's being happening, and this being a tenant where I had provisioned my users for Skype for Business, that's where I'm seeing this option. But let's say if you've got a new customer who's registering for a tenant, let's say today, then they won't see this option. And I'd simply click on Legacy Portal, which would bring me onto Skype for Business Admin Center. And if you look at Voice tab in here, here's where it's going to be the starting point. When you've got the right set of licenses assigned to your users, let's say when you've got a phone system license, which is a PBX, and a calling plan license assigned to one of your users, you'd notice that your user would start appearing under voice users. If you're familiar with Skype for Business on-premises world, what one has to do is one has to simply either run a command or go to the Skype for Business control panel and enable a user for enterprise voice. But with Teams, all you'd have to do is grant the right set of licenses to your users, and automatically they'd be enabled for voice. And all you'd be left with is to acquire the numbers that you intend to use. And to be able to acquire a number, all you'd have to do is click on Voice tab and go to Phone Numbers. Click on the plus sign in here, and you'd get two options. One is of user number and the other one being for service number. And the difference between the two is, when we talk about a user number, it's meant for one-to-one calls. I mean, at any given point in time, you can have a single call. Whereas on a service number, you can have multiple callers calling in onto the same line simultaneously. So a user number would typically be assigned to a user, whereas a service number, I can use it for maybe company mainline, and I can set up auto attendant and call queues. And there's a limit of how many callers could call in. So when I'm acquiring a service number, I can have 200 callers calling in simultaneously at the same time. That being said,
I'll tell you what. Let me see if I got that last part. That as part of preparing for today, I talked to what they call a travel consortium out of Fort Lauderdale this morning, and I was talking to a director there. So they're a call center that takes cruise ship reservations. At the end of the day, you see the ad on TV for a cruise ship in Europe, right? And you call the phone number. They answer, and it goes into a call queue. And the individual I was speaking with, she just started at the first of the year at this travel consortium, and she said they use Teams. So I thought that was very interesting.
right, totally. And again, I mean, that's a good example, I'd say, a good use case of how you could use a service number. And I'm pretty sure that that organization is basically using a service number to set up a call queue. And again, the benefit of using Teams is you could have that set up in a matter of minutes.
Yeah. Sanchit, if you don't mind, maybe if we could have you start to bring this in for a landing. We have Peter Sy from Austin, Texas, ready to go with this research. Good afternoon, Peter. But Sanchit, give it your best shot with a couple other features, and then we'll point people to resources to get more training.
Yep,
And
sure.
Harry, we do have quite a few questions as well, so I'm not sure if we want to do that afterwards before we.
Yeah, how about after Peter? Because I promised Peter we'd only bother him for a few minutes and let him get back to work. So, Sanchit, go ahead, and then Peter, you're on deck.
All right. Yep. So here's what we were looking at. So I have the ability to acquire, let's say, a new user number, and all I'd have to do is specify my user's location so that I could get a number that's essentially the state code. So for instance, if I were to choose any of the states in here, maybe Texas, for instance, and the city being Dallas, and I can acquire, let's say, up to at this point in time, depending upon the licenses that I've subscribed for, I'm entitled to acquire up to 22 numbers. I can have it reserved in the pool of phone numbers that I was enlisting earlier, and I can simply say add. Okay, so looks like Dallas isn't the right city at this point in time because there's no numbers available for it. Let me look at for some other state maybe, and the other city. Let me look at Houston, for instance. All right, so for this city, I've got two numbers, and here are those numbers that I can readily acquire. Right, I'll simply go ahead and click on acquire, and what this would do is this would be added in my reserve, and I can have two users, two individual users enabled for voice with these respective numbers that I've just acquired. And to be able to grant a specific number to my users, again, that's pretty straightforward. I just have to hover my mouse to voice users. And for instance, here's a demo user who's ready with the right set of licenses, and that's the reason it's appearing in here. All I had to do is click on that user, say assign number, and the numbers that I just acquired, which were 349 Houston, Texas. So here's I could simply go ahead and assign that number. And here's what we need to do beforehand. We also need to set up an emergency location. That's mandatory. If I do not have emergency location specified, I won't be able to proceed any further with this step. With that being said, I can simply go ahead and save this. And in a matter of minutes, this would be activated, and you guys could call demo user 4 on the number that we've just acquired. Right now, it's appearing as pending, but and I'd like to switch over to the demonstration how my Teams client would start appearing as a soft phone for me, and how I can dial out to someone, or how I can receive calls. Let's look at the Teams client. I've got Teams client in here, and I'm logged in as Skype user 1. And here's a tab called calls, and when I click on it, I have a dial pad in here which would allow me to dial onto the number, and Skype user 1 has this as its DID number, what I'd do is I'd ask my colleague Naksheti to dial onto this number so that we can see a call coming in to Skype user 1.
Yeah, you're welcome to call my DID. I've got a Cisco phone right off screen, so you could call me and I'll answer, but go ahead.
Yeah, once I see a call coming in, probably the next thing I do is I'll dial your number as well if that's required.
Yeah. And Peter, is your time okay? We're running a couple minutes over. Are you okay with your time?
Yeah, I'm good. I can jump in whenever you need me to.
Okay, I've got a
So-
slide for you next.
Yeah. As you can see here, I've got a call coming in.
Yep.
Yeah. So, all right. So that's how you can enable your user for voice, and at the same time, you get all the functionalities that one would get with any soft phone available in market, which is like if I were to review the history of calls, so I see that the same number, the caller from the same number had called me earlier today, maybe an hour from now, and I can look at my contacts that, I mean, I'd have to add now because this being
Right.
a test user. If someone deposits a voicemail, then it kind of gets saved in here. I can simply access voicemails from within this. It's integrated within Teams. And I just take a couple of few minutes here, Peter. I know I'm taking your time, but yeah, let me quickly wrap this up here. I'd like to showcase some of the collaboration features as well, because I'd say Teams would be incomplete if you'd not look at the collaboration that it offers. So here's where you could look at or manipulate the call features. However, if you were to look at the collaboration platform of it, if I were to go to chats, I can see that all my contacts have been migrated. So my tenant was earlier provisioned for Skype for Business. This user had Skype for Business Online enabled for voice, which means the Skype for Business client application was acting as a soft phone earlier. All those contacts have been migrated, and I was chatting with my colleague Naksheti, and I pinged him. I added one of the documents as an attachment. The beauty of Teams is it also saves or archives this attachment that I'd saved in a SharePoint file that's been provisioned. And if I were to open this up, I do not have to download this onto my machine and open it up using a Word document. Team has the ability to kind of open this up for me. And as you can see, I can simply say edit in Teams. And when I do that, within the Teams, without having to jump onto, let's say, Word Online or maybe some other platforms, I can simply use it within it. So this document is kind of I'm not sure if it's a functional document, but I just wanted to show this to you.
Well, what I really like of what I heard was you have conversation preservation, and that's what I really like about Slack, because I got to tell you guys, the listeners know I kind of dabble around in a couple of different startups, and I'm in one right now, in addition to SMB Nation, where the individual, I hope he's not on the line, but he uses texting for business conversation. And the problem with texting is I don't have conversation preservation, right? And so, there's some important things, and I got to go up to messages.android.com and copy and paste it from my screen to CRM to preserve the conversation, because texting is fine. Hey, you left your lights on in the parking lot, or do you want to go get pizza? That's fine. But that conversation preservation is especially important if you're going to be acquired, right? I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we have to memorialize business communication, and I do like that about Teams, and I have used Teams, so I do like that.
Yep. And one of the good features would be to, besides preservation of chat, you have something called as persistent chat as well. And if I were to create a Teams, right, with, let's say, a group of my colleagues as members of that team. So I've got a demo SMB Nation Teams created in here, and I've got multiple channels. I've created a channel for Tech Talk, and I could have conversations with my peers in here. Again, it's going to give me persistent chat. All the files that I'd be sharing, as a part of, let's say, a project that I'm working upon, all those files would be available to me just by clicking on the Files tab, which is actually being preserved on a SharePoint site that's been provisioned when I created this team. And that's what the beauty of Teams is.
So I'll tell you what, Sanchet and Dave, and I hope you're able to stay on for the rest of the call to help answer questions. But Jenny over in the radio control room, let's bring back Teams for spring quarter. There's enough here that we need to double click down. And Dave, I saw the link that you put up in chat for the partner resource guide, and I'm thinking that is the first step for people to double click down in to get more information, more training, and so on. So Sanchet, thank you very much for, in particular, the telephony discussion. Jenny, if you could give me the baton back, and we'll get to the Spiceworks slide, and then we'll get to the questions. Okay, so just confirming, we see Spiceworks research.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, so by way of introduction, Peter, go ahead and introduce yourself. And for people who don't know who Spiceworks is, what Spiceworks is, based out of lovely Austin, Texas, go ahead and introduce yourself. Then I want to ask you some questions about your recent research on Teams.
Sure. Definitely. So Spiceworks is a company. We're a marketplace for IT professionals and for IT vendors to connect with each other. And we have a community where millions of IT professionals come to visit, to ask questions, to learn about new technologies, and just communicate with each other and build those relationships online. And I've been there for about 6 years now. My title is Senior Tech Analyst, so I look at industry trends such as the adoption of chat communications apps. And we do research throughout the year on a variety of subjects. And we've been following business chat apps since 2016. And the recent report that we released was a follow-up to that report, and we put it out just a couple months ago. And we did look at all of these applications that we've been talking about: Skype for Business, Microsoft Teams, Slack, Google Hangouts, Workplace by Facebook. And we compared them against each other, looked at usage rates, and a lot of IT pros that come to the community. We talked to over 900 of them. They told us why they're using the ones they're using, and they kind of said what attributes of each of these applications that they liked about them.
Yeah, I was surprised. So I came across your study from our publishing partner, Redmond Channel Partner Magazine. Scott Becker had written this up in December or Q4, and I bumped into this, and it seemed appropriate for today. So thank you for your time. And also, I appreciate Spiceworks' funding primary research, which, gang, that's a lost art in media. We all kind of get caught up in copy and paste from press releases. So I appreciate your investment in primary research. I think what was interesting to me is that we're essentially saying Teams your research shows, has overtaken Slack. So let's double click down into that.
Sure. So Teams was just released a couple years ago. And when we first started our research, we knew it was on the horizon, and we wanted to see what planned adoption for Teams was. And it was pretty surprising at the time that so many people said that they planned on using Teams. So when we did this research in 2016, only 3% of respondents said that they were using it. It was still in preview at the time. It might have just launched. But they told us that about 20% of the people we talked to said that they're going to use Teams by 2018. So we did the follow-up study this time around at the end of 2018, and that prediction did come to pass. So Microsoft Teams actually did surpass Slack. We found that currently about 15% of users we talked to were using Slack, and current usage of Microsoft Teams is 21%. So that was a pretty big surprise. We also saw that in the communications space, Skype for Business is still the leader in this space, with 44% of companies that we talked to saying that they used it. So that was pretty interesting as well. Smaller players in this in this study that we talked about. Google Hangouts is only used by about 11% of organizations, and Facebook has a long way to go before they catch up to the other players. We only saw about 1% adoption with them.
Yeah. And your study went on to say that the perception, or the sentiment is a better word, was Slack is innovative, but Teams is secure. And then I might add that essentially Teams is a free good if you have a sufficient Office 365 subscription. Slack,
Right.
after basic use, you would pay for Slack.
Right, and Teams does have a free version too, even for a non-Office 365
Okay.
user.
Okay.
But we did separate research for productivity apps, comparing the likes of G Suite and Office 365, and we found that approximately half of organizations we talked to within the Spiceworks community, which is representative of the overall IT departments out there in the world, they said that they were using Office 365. So the majority of companies are using Office 365. Therefore, it's very easy for all of the reasons we talked about earlier, all these integrations with Office 365 and Microsoft products, and the fact that they don't have to pay any additional money. It's very easy for organizations to give Teams a try, and we're seeing that happen. We asked about future adoption of Teams going forward 2 more years. And by 2020, we think about 40% of organizations will be using Teams at that time.
And maybe the final question I have, and I speaking of copy and paste, I took the liberty of copying and pasting from your press release to make the slide, capitalizing on your primary research. But I wonder what that second bullet point, and maybe this is Dave and Sanchek can pitch in here too, is that I understand an entity may be configured for Skype for Business today, but it looked like from the demo, there's an emerging pathway to then convert that telephony functionality of Skype for Business over to Teams. And Peter, I'll start with you. Do you think that's reflective of what your research findings were, that people already have set up Skype for Business and they haven't started the migration, as it were?
Yeah, we didn't drill down too far into that, but one more thing about the Slack versus Teams difference that I wanted to highlight really quick.
Okay.
For Slack and for Teams, Microsoft is transitioning a lot of Skype for Business users over to Teams, so that's one factor behind the growth. Additionally, Slack had a big early lead, obviously, and they're much more popular among smaller organizations. Like you mentioned, you work for another startup. And I use Slack as well, but it seems like it's great for smaller groups. But Microsoft Teams is more popular among larger organizations. So there might be a difference there. And there's definitely a niche still for Slack, but their growth rate is kind of plateauing right now, whereas Teams is just going up and up. And as I mentioned, Microsoft transitioning a lot of the Skype for Business functionality over to Teams, and then defaulting a lot of users from Office 365 Online over to Teams is playing a big role in that. But beyond that, I think the other panelists would be able to speak to your question a little bit better.
Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, and I was,
go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to add quickly. I understand the sentiment is 53% plan to still be on Skype for Business, but there is a kind of an emerging reality in that we are ending Skype for Business support and actually have ended it for net new tenants who now would use Teams instead of Skype for Business. So there's going to be a drumbeat building for existing Skype for Business deployments to migrate to Teams. So I would actually envision probably by the end of 2020, the reality will be more, a smaller percentage on Skype for Business and a larger percentage on Teams, just due to what we've gone and done. But I understand. This basically would meet my impression of how people feel about this. A more conservative business is going to be, we just got to Skype for Business. We're going to be here for a while, and that's fine. But I like that 41% for Teams. That shows that there are a number of people who have already started kicking the tires.
Right, and I should note that our research was fielded in around October, late October, early November. So
before we made that announcement.
right. So the numbers could shift a little bit as more people learn about the sunsetting or the transition from Skype for Business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and Dave, I'll affirm the small business mentality of sort of conservative and locked and loaded, because I'm using, I don't know if you can see it, a Windows Vista water cup, okay, just to show you that I haven't refreshed.
Yeah, you're talking to one of the authors. I was a ghostwriter for 4 chapters of the Vista Resource Kit, so I'm right there with you.
Blast from the past.
And and that is the reality. And I don't think, just to be completely honest, I don't know how well Microsoft gets that we have a lot of customers who are out there who are just struggling to keep going with what they've got, and they're still running Windows XP, Windows 7, and Microsoft's marching on into the future. And we do need to have a strategy to help these people follow along. And I think Teams helps us lower the bar. Office 365 and Teams kind of go hand in hand, and out of the box gives you some great capabilities. But it's all about getting our customers, some awareness and a plan to be able to afford to do those things in the future as they replace their current infrastructure.
Yep. Hey, Peter, any final thoughts? I know it's your afternoon in sunny Austin, Texas. Love to have you stay if you can, but I appreciate you sharing your research. Any final thoughts?
Sure. Just one more bullet point that we brought up in our analysis. One of the original questions that we asked was, can these collaborative chat platforms like Slack and Teams eventually replace older forms of communication, such as email? And it seemed like in 2016, more folks were optimistic that it would. But now, a couple of years later, when more people have had a chance to kick the tires on Teams and Slack, that opinion has gone down a little bit. So that it would be able to replace older tools like email. So our conclusion was that these tools are great. People love them for a variety of reasons, but they'll be supplemental to email. So we'll have to deal with the legacy stuff for a while.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, with the 2020 elections, if I was running, I'd sure have everybody on Teams or Slack, let me tell you, instead of email. But I'll leave that hanging out there.
But for internal communications, it's great, but maybe not so good for
I understand. I understand. Okay. Thank you, Peter. So Douglas Green out of the Vancouver, Washington, Portland, Oregon area, thank you for being so patient. You are the publisher of Telecom Reseller. Please introduce yourself and your publication and your audience. And I have a couple questions, and then we have a lot of questions lined up.
All right. Well, my name is Doug Green. I'm the publisher of Telecom Reseller, TR Publications. We have about 45,000 readers. They're spread out over 10 different daily bulletins. We report extensively on Microsoft Teams, on Cisco, on Avaya, on the channel, and on a number of things. Basically, to frame it, our readers are involved with real-time communications, which is everything from the management of call centers to basically traditional telephony on the campus of organizations and so on. I sent Jenny some slides. I'm not sure exactly how to mount the slides from here. Wonder if we can queue up the slides. I don't know if she got them.
Yeah, Jenny.
They're not a lot. It's just a couple.
Yeah.
So while we're kind of juggling with that, I want to sort of echo. So I'm not an engineer. I'm not an IT guy. Let's see if I can.
Yeah, but you're a hell of a nice guy. So don't be so hard on yourself.
Hold on. Let's see if I can.
All right. By the way, my friend, your screen is live. Go ahead.
Okay. So my crazy person desktop, and let's see. Here we go. Slideshow. So is that showing there?
Yep, it is. Please proceed, my friend.
Excellent. Okay, so I found this graphic here, and I don't know if this got covered earlier, but this just sort of gives you a view as of last year. So this will be updated in a couple of months. But this is sort of a big overview of where this market was. I was sort of interested in, is there a market, how large it was. I think earlier it was said that initially that was a very small market. People were kind of kicking the tires. But I think something that needs to be said is this, two sort of casual observations from the curb. Netflix. Microsoft has absorbed the lesson of Netflix, which is if you basically present to the public, or in this case businesses, essentially a easy to swallow monthly or annual fee for service, not a lot of money, and you get everything you want. In other words, you get services you normally are going to buy anyways, such as Microsoft Word, Excel spreadsheet, maybe Outlook, maybe some other Microsoft functions. And then if you're there, you bundle in other things such as Microsoft Teams. Not only are you offering basically everybody a very affordable way of accessing these Microsoft products, but if you think about it, you're also basically tempting the market to go uniform with your product. In other words, in the old days of Microsoft, I hope I'm not dating myself, but we all remember actually lining up to get a version of Microsoft Windows. Right? You paid a lump of money and then you loaded it into your computer and so on. Right? Microsoft now essentially is no longer a software company. We should think of them as a services company, and they're charging people a very light on the land fee for those services. That's the genius of this whole thing. And if you think about it on that simple way, you start to begin to comprehend the vast nature of the market, simply because everybody has a tablet, everybody has a phone. I read a statistic, interestingly enough. Zimbabwe, which is one of the poorest countries in the world, currently has more cell phones than they have people. And that's a country where people struggle to eat every day. So what's happened is these devices, even in poor places, are relatively ubiquitous. They're relatively easy to access. So long as there's some access to Wi-Fi or the internet, these services can be delivered. And Microsoft is figuring out a way to deliver them flat, very low fee. And what that creates is a standardized market where I think Harry was sort of talking about this old system of pasting and so on. So the whole thing is this integration. And you can see from this slide here, 200,000 organizations that already basically full-on adopted this. You can see that it says here in the past year, 3 million teams were created. So I'm betting in the coming year we're going to be looking at least 6 or 9 or 12. Nearly 70% of Skype for Business enterprise customers are using Teams. So that was huge. That means from my point of view, I always reported on the Skype part. The big question was, would the Skype users migrate? They did. At this point, I'm sure that the migration is, of course, further along. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So this is from Gartner. And this sort of, I hope, sort of amplifies what I just said. This is a report. I'm not offering the report. But look at the headline. Why Microsoft Teams will soon be just as common as Outlook. So this is what I'm sort of driving at. Everybody's got 4 or 5 devices. Microsoft is saying, hey, pay us a little bit of money. We'll license all of your devices with all the same software off the cloud. And now all those devices are useful. And now also everyone else doing that, you can communicate and integrate with other people easily. Here's another piece from another company, just basically amplifying the success of this program. This, by the way, is from the Register, a little bit of a sarcastic publication out of the United Kingdom. But basically, again, Redmond broadside Slack with unlimited message history and more storage. So my big message, my big finding here is, I think the market is really large. I think in many ways it's unlimited, and I think this idea of collaboration is the way to go. We need to stop thinking about voice and data and all these separate silos. It's a very dated way of thinking. We need to think about communication as a collaborative thing. I think the challenge for everybody listening, if you've run a traditional company, is the business model in a fee-for-service world is really different than the traditional model of selling a product and then going on and selling another product. And Harry, with that, I'll let you.
Yeah, I can't resist a little humor in terms of collaboration and communication, because boy, that sounds like a conversation with my first wife, my only wife, but that she would love Microsoft Teams to be able to spur more collaboration and communication.
And I think the huge picture is just as I think basically that it's this. The smartphone might end up being, of all the different innovative products that have come out in the last 40 years, it might end up being that the smartphone is actually the most revolutionary device, just simply because it's in your pocket. So there's nothing like that. There's no other technology that's just so widespread that's in your pocket. And the idea that you could have a single company, Microsoft, be able to reach everybody with different ways of communicating, sending a document, sending an SMS text of some kind, communicating by voice and so on, right? Over basically a single platform with a modest fee. Well, gee, that's a kind of big market. I think it was just said we still have a lot of businesses. That said, let's note the ocean of opportunity out there is probably this. If you look out the window of your building and so on, you're observing probably a lot of businesses which are not anywhere near transformed to Microsoft Teams. There's an enormous number of companies to migrate. So that'll be a challenge, but it is an opportunity. Oh, and by the way, this is self-promotion. What you're looking at here is we put out a daily bulletin on Teams.
Yeah, absolutely. That's telecomreseller.com. Well, Doug, are you comfortable, and other panelists, are we ready to take questions? Jenny's indicated we have a bunches of them queued up. So Jenny, give it your best shot. And then Jameson, I haven't forgotten you. We're going to come back to you, Jameson. Hang in there.
The list is long. Let me try to get back up to the top here, Harry.
Yeah, I was going to say, take
Jameson,
it from the top.
Are you really behind? Are you really sitting in front of that spectacular backdrop? It looks so cool, though.
Was the Office Pro Plus 2016 or 2019 in O365, M365, or on premise?
Dave?
Let me see if I got that straight. Office Pro Plus with the year numbers is the basically the packaged product. Office 365 Pro Plus is the evergreen version of Microsoft Office that comes with Office 365. That makes sense?
Yep. Jenny?
Perfect. Are we going to ask about access to Office 365 E5 for resellers?
Well, sure, we can ask. I mean, Dave, I think that's a slam dunk, right? E5 for resellers?
As I might need a little more clarification.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they mean as Action Pack, because I thought Action Pack is E3, right? And I might be dating myself.
Yeah, as a partner benefit, I believe E3 is what we're providing.
Okay.
Yeah, and probably mostly because there's some pretty extensive costs in providing that infrastructure for the telephony, and I think it's the same probably for EMS as well.
Yeah, it's real money. It's real money to get downtown. Jenny, next.
We got a couple comments. Bainbridge Tech are big fans of Teams. Questions for clients using Teams. In biz development efforts, when clients want to share screens to present offerings, they don't want to request audience to download Teams client. Is there a way around the download?
There is a Teams web client. when you send someone a invite to a Teams meeting and they initially click on it, it should take them to a web page. And from that page, you can run the web client.
Perfect. Chip Reeves with Bigger Brains says Teams training is one of our best selling. It's number 2 behind Office 365 in terms of demand and sales for us. That tells me there's a ton of demand for companies who are moving to Teams or exploring moving to Teams.
Yeah. No, and thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Chip. Chip's one of our strategic partners over on the video training side, online training, Bigger Brains. And Chip, I had no idea. I mean, this webinar has been educational for me because, I only know what I know. Jenny?
How hard is it to port my current number over to this system?
Okay, so to answer that question, like I said, right, within the admin center that I showcased during the demonstration, if you've noticed, just besides the phone numbers from where I was acquiring phone numbers, I had an option of port orders. I can submit to porting orders where I need to specify the block of numbers that I intend to port with Microsoft, and our field team would reach out to you, would help you explain the entire procedure. And it involves reaching out to your existing telco provider, and they get your numbers ported. So they'd also be specifying the timeline over an email over which the actual porting would happen, and you'd see those numbers available in the pool of numbers. You can have your users set up in the meanwhile, and when the actual switch happens where the number would be ported over to Microsoft as your telco provider, you'd be good to go.
And
I had
and
some yeah.
and let me ask a follow up on that one. That would be part of the propagation time period to activate the extension, right, Sanchit?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Jenny?
And I have one other follow-up. Sorry, this is Dave.
Yeah, go ahead.
If someone's on Skype for Business today and they want to migrate their DID to Teams, what's the process, or is that just automatic?
Yeah, so that's got to be automatic. So you'd have to fall back to using, I mean, if they are using Skype for Business Online, right? So we've got those modes like island mode, and you can perform an upgrade. There's an upgrade policy where you can define whether you. This is exactly what I've done in my tenant that I demonstrated today. My user with which I logged in today, which is Skype user 1 on Teams, I'd enabled it for voice on Teams. It was earlier enabled for Skype for Business with the same number. All I had to do is change the upgrade policy of that user from Skype for Business online only mode to Teams only mode. So currently during this transition, we've got 3 different modes available that as an organization you can adopt to, because we understand that this is a transition and not every user would be familiar or would be ready for this change. We would expect the users to immediately adopt to Teams, but we understand that it's got to be a gradual process, and that's where we've given this flexibility to maybe adopt at its own pace for the users. And you could have, let's say, a coexistence mode, which is also known as island mode, wherein a user could be logged in onto Skype for Business Online for voice, whereas they could use Teams simultaneously for collaboration. So that option is available. And to answer this question, to port from DIDs on Skype for Business Online, all I'd have to do is change the upgrade policy of my user to Teams only from Skype for Business only.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, hey, Jenny, how about one more for this segment? Then I want Jameson to give us feet on the street with Teams and how he's using it.
All right. Does Teams require that the SharePoint site be set up? We have some clients that haven't been using SharePoint yet, and though it's part of their subscription, they haven't been using.
That's actually a very good question, I'd say. What basically happens is when you create a Teams, the SharePoint site is automatically provisioned in the backend. So they do not have to do anything in addition to creating up a team.
All righty. Well, folks, we'll get to the questions after Jameson. Want to spend a few minutes Jameson, Las Vegas is sure looking pretty green behind you today.
Japanish, right? Yeah.
Go ahead and introduce yourself for people that don't know. You come from the Seattle MSP community, and then tell us about your new startup and how you're using Teams.
Sure. So I owned an MSP in the Seattle area for about 21 years. We did several acquisitions and then finally I sold that business in 2016. We were extremely focused on Microsoft, and I'm fairly well known for kind of being a Microsoft Cloud bleeding blue in the Microsoft Cloud space. Won several Microsoft Cloud Partner of the Year awards and the like for the region, and I we were a Link. We were in a Link implementer. Then we were OCS pre-Link. So I go way back in this space. And ultimately Skype for Business, and as the Link server became Skype for Business server, we were doing premise-based implementations and then really watching how the cloud stuff works. So I've been on the IT services and reseller side of this for many years. After I sold the business, Teams was just showing up in the SKU at about that time. I do not know what's going on my phone. Sorry. And
that's Sanchez calling directly with the new telephony. But go ahead.
Yeah, something's going on and everything's blowing up. So what we did is we ended up implementing Teams in my new startup business. So we have now I don't want to confuse things, but my new company is called Teamatics. It has nothing to do with Teams. It's an HR platform to basically allow organizations who are trying to help their employees best utilize their strengths, interests, and passions in designing their career and advancement and find opportunities within an organization. Provides engagement and purpose for growth. But it was an early startup. The tendency or trend right now is definitely you see in these kind of Silicon Valley startup SaaS platforms a tremendous amount of Slack and Gmail, and it's kind of a Google Slack environment until security and stability and costs start to come into play with disparate applications. So we opted internally to embrace Teams. I kind of dictated that as part of to my co-founder. So we utilize Teams internally. I mean, that last question was relevant. Not needing to configure SharePoint or think about much. Just literally having an Office 365 SKU, spinning up a couple teams, and being able to collaborate, do file sharing and storage, and OneNote integration all into the Teams interface has made this an extraordinarily simplistic endeavor. I'm also very involved with another SaaS platform where I'm part of the organization. It's called Smileback, and does customer satisfaction and NPS scoring and the like for customers on a host of different ticketing platforms, traditionally ConnectWise, but now expanding to about 24 different ticketing platforms that we're integrated with today, and they're fully on the Slack and Gmail side of the fence. So I play a lot in both systems, and it's been a really interesting time to both experience both platforms at the same time, and then also work with co-founders and collaborate on both of these platforms and hear the opinions as they come back. So it's been an interesting journey.
Okay, I think I'm back. I muted my mic out of respect, but your Teamatics startup, is that the human capital management? There's an acronym for what you do, right?
Well, we call it performance development. So
okay.
It's in the human capital space, but performance development, it's a shift from traditional performance management, which is very organization centric, and we're seeing progressive organizations find reasons that's beginning to break down. This traditional approach of the organization, here's the KPIs and metrics that I need you to perform against, and now we're going to judge you and tell you in your annual performance how well you've done, and it's fraught with anxiety and discomfort, to flipping the script tremendously. We're seeing, especially in the Seattle tech scene, we see these organizations who are like, wait, if we turn this around, if we want to attract and retain our best people, if we invest in their growth, if we allow them to self-reflect on their strengths, interests, passions, and then grow towards opportunities in alignment with their desires, they will accelerate on their own in a way that aligns with the organization. But it's about developing your people as opposed to forcing what the organization needs on them. It's a very different and forward-thinking approach.
Yeah, and the hook I wanted to bring out is teams is synergistic with the collaborative nature of your workflow, right? It's kind of I'm not articulating it very well, but it, in my mind's eye, it kind of makes sense with HR and workflow in an organization. So on, Teams could be a fantastic tool. That's what I'm trying to say.
So the two ways we think about Teams: number one, we're using it internally as a back-end platform for us to communicate, and with some customers who are also on Teams, and we have we are able to cross tenants and have direct communications with some of our customers as well who utilize the platform. So that's how we utilize it internally. In terms of what we can do with Teams from a SaaS Teamatics platform, it's very interesting. We see so many SaaS companies doing this, but if you go into the store for Teams, or you go into add, I've configured channels, and we've got all these integrations. We are looking at adopting or implementing an integration with Teams. We connect mentees with mentors. If I desire to grow in a specific skill or utilize an LMS platform and want to connect with other resources, and I can immediately establish that connection with a Teams conversation and make it a seamless approach, instead of saying, here's the email of the person you want to talk to or a phone number. It's more likely to be adopted. It's seamless, and it's that type of approach that we're seeing all these SaaS, but we're just enabling an entirely different way to work, and it's powerful.
All right, last question, Jameson. Did you drop down to CES in your new hometown of Las Vegas? Did you pop down?
I was there yesterday for 4 or 5 hours. Yeah, I went last year for the first time. I've always wanted to go. Last year I explored the convention center. It's shocking how massive it is. There were 182,000. There's 182,000 people in town down the street here, so that's not a small number to just fly in for a week. And yesterday I visited the Sands Expo. It's just it was all the sports stuff and physical things, and it's just unbelievable. They also have an area there down on the bottom floor. If anybody ever gets it, it's the startup area with all the international little booths of crazy ideas, and it was amazing what's happening there.
Yeah, I got to do it once. I did it 9 years ago with Matt Makowitz back when he was an MSP. We went down together, and Jameson is like living at 3 football stadiums for a week, right?
Yeah.
An NFL stadium that's 3 times the size. Thank you, Jameson. Hang out if you can. Jenny, we have 10 minutes left, so let's try and take the questions head on, and away we go.
So where is the link for the DI and Teams guide? We had a couple people asking for the link, so we probably just want to reiterate, we will send out all the links in a follow-up email. So look for the follow-up email, which will have a replay, and then it will also have any links or PDFs that we have to distribute as well.
Jenny, I'm sorry, Doug Green, if you want us to socialize your deck, let Jenny know, and we'll include that in the thank you notice so people could better understand how to subscribe to your offering.
Sure, I'll enhance it and send it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Jenny.
What is the minimum employee count that can benefit the use of Teams versus Slack?
Yeah, Jameson. Yeah. Why don't you take it from the real world too?
Look, I too. I mean, look, it's just like being able to. I believe in order to allow growth and collaboration, you need to be able to scale the conversation. So like Harry said, texting with each other, I mean, you can do that, but it's not, you're not maintaining threads and conversations in a way that's relevant. You're not segregating the conversation into appropriate ways. You're not keeping notes and putting all these pieces together. So if you're using Office 365, I mean, turning on Teams is just obvious. If you're not, if you're over on the Slack side, it's the same. I find that just being able to maintain and carry a conversation from my computer to my phone as I walk out the door and not even and have it be a seamless communication. It's not just internally for your team. So I love the name Teams. I think it's a great brand. It's better than Skype for Business. But one thing that it does is it makes people think that it only works within their team, and that's really not true. It's replacing the communications mechanism that Microsoft's designed as a SaaS platform. And when you get into your roll-up telephony, I could see myself as a business of one utilizing that platform.
Okay, Jenny?
What about Skype telephone handsets with no upgrade path firmware for Teams? Will they continue to work with Teams?
Yeah, Doug Green, can you field that question about handsets? You work with Mitel and Avaya and so on. And Jenny, I believe the second part of Jenny, repeat, please.
Yep. What about Skype telephone handsets with no upgrade path firmware for Teams? Will they continue to work with Teams?
Well, I'll answer it this way. My understanding in talking to Yealink and a number of other vendors, Polycom, now Plantronics and so on, is that first of all, I think almost everybody who makes handsets as part of a desktop phone is trying to make sure that their product is Teams ready. I know I'm maybe not answering the question directly, but I think there's a significant point here that indicates sort of what may be happening in the market. As soon as Teams showed up, and as soon as basically the manufacturers of handsets and traditional, if you will, desktop phones, another company would be Audio Codes, figured out, hey, this is going to be huge. They immediately did whatever they could to make sure that their phones were Microsoft Teams ready, because otherwise what they were worried about doing is no one would want to buy their product. And what I'm hearing from customers or actual end users, and this is a little insight, is this. A lot of people are saying to me, well, I haven't done Microsoft Teams yet. We're experimenting with it, we're trying it here and there, but I'm buying products that are Microsoft Teams ready. So if that's the direction we decide to go in, because there's other things on the table, that's the direction we're going in, I'm ready. So the big picture, I think, is customers who know what they're doing are trying to ready themselves, and just about all the major OEMs that make phones are trying to make product ready to go.
Dave Field, do you have a HCL hardware compatibility list or any guidance?
Yeah, we and Sanjit might have a little more on this, but I did want to just add to this. Part of what might be driving that conversation is, I believe I saw a report that some handset manufacturers were not going to be porting their handsets to Teams. They essentially saw it as an opportunity to sell an upgraded handset, and that unfortunately has been kind of our world. I mean, even in the world of Windows, I remember when we got Windows XP and the certain printer manufacturers said, we won't write an XP driver for all these old printers, you got to buy new ones. So that happens.
Amen. All righty. Tell you what, in the spirit of time, Jenny, we got 5 minutes left, so let's rock. Next question.
Is Teams going to be on Business 365?
Dave?
Microsoft 365 Business? Yes. Microsoft 365 Business gives you Office 365 Business Premium, which includes telephony.
Okay. Jenny?
Someone says, how about making money?
Well, I mean, I'll take a first stab at it and then kind of hand back over to Doug Green because Doug, I thought Peter Tsai has dropped down in Austin, Texas, as expected, but the momentum, Doug, that you showed on that prior slide, I mean, this is sector momentum, guys. There are other sectors that are contracting. Uh, for example, Jameson, the long conversation you and I have had about the Seattle housing bubble that you sold out of a couple years ago, the bubble burst, Jameson, the bubble burst. That's a contracting sector, if you will, versus Doug Green. The first slide you showed an expanding sector, and to me, that's opportunity, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, there are, let's be honest and let's be clear. We're in a period of time when companies are looking at multiple ways to migrate going forward. And there are certainly very viable ways outside of Microsoft Teams and that whole direction to go. Where this is such a huge opportunity, though, is just think about the way Microsoft is present, even when people don't think it's present. Do you know anybody who's an Apple user who doesn't use Word or who doesn't use Excel? Everybody uses this, right? So where I think I think the question was, where can I make money, right? I think it's pretty clear that money can be made. The challenge is, as I mentioned before, is this. It's a challenge to make money when you have a fee-for-service program, and when there's a certain amount of do-it-yourself nature that's sort of built into this, right? So I think the opportunities as I see them is this, and this may be very basic. I think a lot of, let's say, call them interconnects, an old-fashioned company. The interconnect asset is you know who your customers are. You know, here I'm in Portland, Vancouver area. There's a couple of very prominent Avaya, Mitel, and so on interconnects that I can think of. They still have a very valid customer base. It's active, it's live, they can call them up. And were I them, I think I would be talking to these customers and saying, you know, how are we doing with that stuff we installed 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago? Begin the conversation, but be mindful that you're going to have to sort of chaperone them from a system of work that they were doing to something new. I'll give you just a very, very small use case of this work. Kind of a sad one, but it turned out to be very nice. A church here in Little Vancouver was attacked by an arsonist. Another organization approached them and so on. Make a long story short, one of the things they needed to do was, while they rebuilt their building, they needed to basically continue all their operations in another place. They moved to Microsoft Teams because it was inexpensive. But what was eye-opening for this, so you can't get any more simple and old-fashioned than a church, right? It's like an old key system. I don't know what they had running, Merlin or something. Yeah. We in technology sometimes forget that people that are not in our world don't realize, oh, I don't need to be in a location to take a phone call. Oh, I don't need to be in one place to do work. That's so obvious to us, but it's not entirely obvious even to many of your current customers. That's the point I'm driving at. So it was a huge revelation to these folks that, hey, this is less expensive, and we're actually able to serve our parishioners less expensively and more quickly, and you know, I can do this for wherever I am. That's sort of been around in many ways in the technology world for a while. I want to bring this up. A very large number of companies, even in a place like Portland, Seattle, Vegas, which have huge high-tech sectors, are low-tech companies. There's a lot of people that work for low-technology companies. And if you can figure out how to gently bring those customers over, not talk about technology, we're not talking about technology. We're talking about, this is easy to do. This is something you guys can afford. Let's not waste money on another phone system, which doesn't do very much for you. Let's be modern. I think that's how you can make money. The problem will be internally, you've got to figure out how that commission structure works. You got a bunch of folks that are used to making a nice hunk of money off of selling a system, maybe. Now they've got to look at recurring income. And you may have to create a separate business model. I know a number of dealers who've created a separate business entity for this purpose. So
Yep.
that you don't have those two conflicts competing. I mean, those two cultures competing.
And Jameson, let me call out to you, and then we'll take one more question. But you and I had that talk with after you were acquired, no names and no suspects and no guilty parties, but you indicated that you had built your practice, involved your consultancy in the cloud, and you were acquired by an out-of-state company that had more of a legacy point of view. And I distinctly remember you talking about the business model challenges of integrating the acquisition, brother.
Yeah, no, it was a speed, right? So the company that acquired us, brilliant, but really high operational maturity. So they revved a little slower than we did as a smaller, more dynamic company. Also, one that was born in Microsoft's backyard when the acquiring party was not. They were in Texas. So it was and not that they weren't good at the vision side, they just didn't execute as quickly because they were larger and they had very established clients. So it took a bit more time. I could spend an hour another day on how I think the business model needs to shift to address this premise-based, legacy-based technology into embracing SaaS, cloud, primarily around identity management first, and really, taking care of the individual customer identity and security, and then expanding from there. And that idea of anywhere, anytime, any device, that Satya Nadella thing he says that I so believe in. It's the how you make money on that is a big question. Teams as a product, I mean, you make whatever percent of whatever you make from Microsoft as a CSP, and that's it. But that's not where the money is. And I think that there's a giant business model conversation behind it, and definitely a webinar for another day. But
yeah, I'm going to make a side note. Let's do that spring quarter, Jameson. Let's get you back. Maybe I can justify a trip down to Las Vegas and sit in front of that wonderful blue screen of yours, and we'll have a fancy background. Hey, Jenny, we are over time. One more question, then we got to let the good people get back to work.
Yeah, when will Skype contacts be imported into Teams? I didn't see it on the Teams roadmap.
Sanchez or Dave?
To answer that question, so here's how it functions. Let's say I'm using Skype for Business right now, and I have got a handful of contacts created. I being an end user, and if I perform an upgrade, right, which I was referring to in one of the questions asked earlier today, which is to grant an upgrade policy to my users from Skype for Business only mode to Teams only mode, and that's when my contacts would kind of start appearing within Teams.
Yep.
Harry, one more question, because we've had quite a few people ask it.
Okay.
People want to know, how is Jameson doing that amazing background?
Hey, I actually have a feature request for Microsoft and Slack out there. So I live out of my home office. I use Zoom for my video conferencing and demos and video calls constantly. And it has an incredible green screen feature, but I've gotten so used to it that if I turn that off and just communicate to you like I usually do, all you'll see is a green screen. So not very many video applications support that technology yet. Zoom's jaw-droppingly good at it, but I use Teams day to day. So I have an app that you should all download called OBS that basically emulates a webcam. So you do all this work and then it emulates it, and then it looks like my webcam in every video conferencing app I have. $10 for the green screen from Amazon.
And I will add that Teams does have a feature called Blur Screen, which will blur your background so you don't see the wife and kids running around chasing each other.
That's great.
Oh, I love it. Well, panelists, you've been more than generous with your time and totally appreciate it. Audience, really robust audience. So, to the Chip Reeves out there, that's just affirmation about the momentum that Teams has. And then to end on, we'll get your questions, and Jenny, I'll endeavor to answer those, and we can make that part of the follow-up email. Next week, I'm in the Silicon Valley, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, if you guys want a beer. And then I'm speaking on blockchain and some other topics at IT Expo, end of month in Fort Lauderdale. Doug, I just know I'm going to see you at IT Expo, aren't I, brother?
Yes, you will. Actually, at the MSP Pavilion,
Yep.
or whatever they're calling it.
Yep. Okay, well, back to the salt mines. Happy New Year's. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.